Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast,
where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture.
We talk to producers all over the country,
From small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations.
Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades,
We hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs.
here's your host, Troy McClung.
Well, it's Pastured Pig Podcast time again. Glad you all decided to listen, to download, or maybe it just automatically popped up in your feed. So either way, glad you're here. Please don't take off. For those of you that are curious, I did want to let you know that the intro voice you hear, that beautiful young lady's voice that you hear, is actually my wife, Kelly. She appreciates me saying young. But she stepped in to do our voice intro, and appreciate her doing that. So a little shout out to her. Well, I want to give some updates. What's going on here at Red Tool House? We are still in our drought. It's starting to get a bit of a concern. I think they're forecasting rain, some pretty decent amount of rain next week, which would be the first full week of October. So we're hoping that's the case. Right now it's a little dry on the farm, a little dusty. All of my streams have dried up, and the one pig wallow, which is a real low spot down by the stream, it's kind of funny. It reminds me of a fat kid in a kiddie pool. I'm not going to say fat kid because I'm a fat kid. So there's just enough water there for one of my breeding sows to fit in, and her legs kind of stick out on either side, and she doesn't get very submerged in it. So it's kind of funny. She's each one of them go down, and of course we have pecking order. So if one of the low pigs on the totem pole's in the wallow, then one of the alphas come by and knock them out and run them off. So hoping we can get some rain to get tempers to subside and and get a little more solidarity in the breeding sow group. Well, we wanted to recognize our sponsor for this episode and appreciate these companies working with us. Hopefully we can get more involved and allow me to reinvest in the podcast and provide even more quality information for you all if that's the case. This week it's Titan Equipment. And Titan Equipment is a tractor attachment company. They sell a myriad of tractor attachments for farm tractors and skid steers. I have two of their attachments. I have a 6-inch wood chipper that's PTO driven, and I also have an auger/post hole digger. I've used both of those quite a bit. The 6-inch chipper has been awesome on the farm. We can never have too many wood chips. I use them for everything from bedding for the animals to mulching for the garden. We do the deep litter method to just all kinds of great stuff. Even putting them down as some mud abatement if we ever get mud again on some of our trails and stuff here on the farm. So Titan Equipment, we've run that chipper and it's run great. I really like the fact that they offer free home delivery. So where we are rural here in southern West Virginia, we had a big box truck roll up and drop those pieces of equipment off to me. I didn't have to go transport them and bring them back on a trailer and do all that. It was great. Actually, if you want to see videos featuring either of those two pieces of equipment, I have those on our YouTube channel, and I'll put links to those down in our show notes so you can check those out. Really solid products, good warranties. I've really been impressed with the build and construction of them. Well, okay, moving on to our interview topic today. I have, this is another interview with somebody that's new to pastured pigs. So I really appreciated our interview last week with Jack. And so we've got a couple more like that. And this one this week with Chris is similar. So Chris is new to pigs. He and his wife have been raising pigs for about a year and a half now. He does have some farm experience. It's kind of interesting. He's a school teacher turned pig farmer. He still teaches, but he and his wife have always wanted to have a farm of their own. And so they got into pigs, just looking at some additional farm income. And of course, as we all know, as we all kind of have a similar story, wanting to know where their food comes from. Well, I'm not going to give away any more of Chris's details. I'm going to let him tell the tale. So this is Chris Dymski, and he is in Pennsylvania. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast. I'm so excited to do yet another episode and sit and talk with another guest on the podcast. Tonight we have Chris Dymski from Pennsylvania, and he's kind of new to the pastured pig world. But talking to him a little bit before we started recording, he does have some farm experience, and it sounds like he's off and running quite well. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Troy. Appreciate being on.
All right, so you are in, you said in mid-Pennsylvania right now?
Yeah, South Central PA, pretty close to Harrisburg.
Okay, so that's very similar zone to what we experience here in West Virginia, not too far away. Okay, so how long have you been raising pastured pigs?
I've been doing it now for, I guess, about a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, about a year and a half.
So
not very long.
Yeah. So what? Let's back up a little bit. What led you to? Obviously, this isn't a full-time gig for you. So give us a little background of who Chris is and what got you to the point of bringing pigs on property.
Yeah. Well, so I grew up on a farm, and then I, went to college and all that stuff, and became a school teacher. I'm in my late 20s now. I've been teaching school for a couple of years. And then my wife and I's dream was always to get a farm of our own. So about 3 years ago, we moved back home here to Pennsylvania, and we purchased our own farm. It's an 11-acre farm, and we stretched ourselves just a little bit on the budget for the size of house we were getting, and just kind of thinking like, hey, this is going to kind of be our forever home, and we'll work on it. But in the lines of that, my thought process was, well, hey, if we're going to pay a little extra for this farm, it's going to have to kind of help with the bills. And so kind of started thinking about, hey, how can my farm help me make a little bit of money to pay for itself? And that combined with sort of my wife and I's philosophy on health and food and a lot of the sustainability stuff that I know a lot of your listeners are into, and just knowing where your food comes from, that kind of got me thinking. And then it was, okay, well, what are low barriers to entry? I'm probably not going to, start up a dairy milking thing, or, what are just some quick things I can do that, like I said, low barriers to entry. And I grew up on a farm that wasn't commercial by any means, but, I had every manner of animal at some point growing up. And pigs was the one thing that my family always just appreciated most when it came to butcher time, because it was, we would do like broiler chickens, and it was chicken, but with a pig you had bacon and sausage and chops and all the stuff, and it just seemed to give the most when it came time to butcher time. And so I was like, hey, let's try that. So started doing some research, came across the Facebook group, and been off and running ever since.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's back up a little and so looking at moving back home, acquiring some property, something with a house on it, and then kind of making that connection, say, okay, this is a pretty substantial investment. We need to see if this investment can work for us. Did you have to convince your wife in that situation? Was she totally on board with this? What kind of marital bliss did we have in this situation there?
Yeah, no, she was on board. She does not have a farming background. She is from the suburbs of Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's farmland in the sense that it's Midwest, but she was not. She was definitely a suburbia girl. However, through the process of us courting and that kind of thing, and her coming back to visit my family and the farm, she fell in love with that kind of lifestyle. So she was all in with getting the farm, and it worked out fine. So we were on the same page with it. And like I said, she doesn't really know anything about farming, but she was totally on board to start learning. And now, we had pigs get out today when I was at work, and she was out there wrangling them for me. So she's been awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's nice having a spouse or a helpmate there to really be able to help with the burden, especially with all farm jobs and things that comes in handy. So you had mentioned something that resonates with me, and I think resonates with a lot of us that get into the sustainable agriculture is starting to look at the source of your food, where your food comes from, the makeup of the food, and just getting a better understanding of that, and then, of course, taking a lot of that responsibility on personally. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, shoot, I don't even know where to begin. There in America, just the way our food system is set up, we don't know more than half of the ingredients that are in our food. You know, my wife is a label reader, and no one, it seems, reads labels, and she will be in the grocery store and she'll look at a thing. And, you know, if there's words that she can't pronounce, you know, like, I don't know, dexatroxin or something like that. And if we don't know what that is offhand, then we're starting to question, hey, should I put that in my body? And I think that's a question in America that so few people are asking. I mean, fortunately, more and more are, but, you know, broad scale, you know, whether it's, you know, fast food, microwave food, whatever we're getting, there's just not that connection to where the food comes from. And so it's all preservative laden and, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, cancer rates are higher than ever. And there's probably some correlation there. And so we know that it's a huge uphill battle, and, you know, it's really hard to be a total purist with it. But my philosophy is kind of like, hey, whatever step we can take, whether it's growing a tomato in the garden or knowing what you fed your meat before you eat it, you know, whatever little thing we can do is a step in the right direction. And, you know, garbage in, garbage out type philosophies. So, yeah, just, I guess, caring more about that. I think just asking the question, what am I eating? That's a great first step.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that's a step I think a lot of people in our country and in the West in general need, quite frankly. But, you know, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And would you say, it was safe, you mentioned you had, before we started recording, you mentioned you had 2 young girls. You know,
yeah.
In my experience, when our boys were born, that was when we started thinking about that, and it just brought all that to the forefront. It had been in the back of our minds, but as our kids were born, we're like, hey, we really got to start looking at what we're eating and why we're eating it. So,
yeah, definitely, especially for them, because they have no preconceived notions of what food is or should be, and so, yeah, that's definitely something that my wife and I have talked about a lot as far as, you know, what they eat. You know, whatever we feed them is normal for them. And so if we can feed them well, and if we can get them to question junk, you know, then it won't be weird for them. It's hard for me to not eat an Oreo because I've grown to love Oreos,
right.
Even though I can objectively read the label and be like, hey, this is awful for me. But, you know, if I can train the next generation to just be like, well, hey, that's gross because of what it could do to my body, then yeah, I that's a good point about educating the next generation. We definitely have thought about that.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, let's. One other thing you said there that I like, and I think this is critical, and I try to emphasize this with people that ask me about getting started with pigs. You mentioned this low barrier to entry with pigs. So explain that a little bit and what your experience as to how that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't even remember how I got my first pigs, to be honest with you. I think it was on Craigslist or something. But, you know, you can buy a feeder pig for, I don't know, you know, $50, $100, something like that. You can get a couple of them, and, you know, there's, you know, not that much upfront investment. Depending on the property you already have, you know, obviously that could be an investment, but assuming you have some place to put them, even if it's an acre, you know, you can buy the animal. It's just not that much. And if it doesn't work out, you know, you can butcher the thing and say, okay, that wasn't that fun. I'm not going to do that again. So it just, like I said, I mean, low barrier to entry, I think, is the best way to put it. And then, you know, the grow out times, you know, obviously depending on the breed and the feed and all that stuff, are manageable. You know, it's, you know, it's not like, I don't know, raising a cow, which could take longer, or you can do it fairly quickly and see some pretty quick results, which I think like that can help you gain momentum. Like we got our first pigs in February and we butchered in July. So grand scheme of things, that's not that long a time for me to get, you know, a bacon seed in the back of the truck to actual bacon in my pan. You know, that was kind of like, hey, here's a little bit of success. Like, this is cool. As opposed to if it was, you know, a longer time to put in before you saw any fruit out of it. And I think that kind of builds momentum to keep you going, if that makes sense. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I agree. I think all those points are very valid. And you know, one thing that when we first got started years ago looking at this, that was my first motivation. Is like, okay, how much investment am I going to have to make to get into this? Hey, we'd been raising chickens for a while, so we knew what kind of money we had tied up there. But when you look at pigs, You don't necessarily need heavy equipment, so you don't have to go out and buy a big tractor. You don't have to go out and buy a big hay baler or things that can handle those large bales like you would with cattle. Nor do you have to make that large investment in confinement, in fencing. Yeah, and that's the thing that really resonated with me is like, okay, a couple strands of electric fence run through the woods, and I may be able to have pastured pigs versus trying to keep a goat in, trying to keep predators off my chickens, trying to keep a cow in a certain area. So I think
that's a great point.
Yeah, I think that's something
the fencing part.
Yeah, a lot of people don't necessarily take all those into consideration. But I love your discussion there about your point about the grow out times as well. That you can see the fruits of your labor, and then hopefully that's motivation to continue forward. Well,
yeah, for sure. Okay,
so let's talk about you're a year and a half in. I assume first grow out season's done. You're working on your second grow out season. So let's talk a little bit about the first season. So you found some pigs on Craigslist, I assume. What was your choice and selection there, and how did that first year work out for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I forget the details on it, but I remember researching breeds, and I figured out pretty quickly I want to go, like the heritage route and do the pastured thing as best I can. And then I remember researching different breeds, and ended up that I wanted to pursue Herefords. And so, which Herefords are kind of hard to find, but happened to find a random guy on Craigslist that was maybe 2 hours away. And I remember I sent my dad to go and pick him up. So my dad goes and picks up four Hereford piglets who were intact boars. Okay. And I forget how old they were. They were probably 6-8 weeks, whatever someone would sell a wiener pig at. And I remember the guy giving my dad a scalpel in case he wanted to fix them, but they weren't fixed. And at this point, I don't know about Vortain or anything like. I don't know the controversy,
right.
One way or the other.
Right.
And so my dad comes back and tells me that, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll look into it. And it kind of like laziness factor kicked in, and these pigs just keep getting bigger and bigger, and we don't take the time to go and cut them. And so, the bigger they get, the less likely that's going to be that you're going to do that.
Exactly.
And so we're like, I don't know how far into it, but we're at the point of no return where these pigs are too big to manhandle. I'm too cheap to pay a vet to come in and put them down and do that. And so I start doing some serious research into Vortain to see like, hey, basically, am I screwed, or could this be okay? So I did a whole bunch of reading on that, on stuff that Walter had done with the bio research and everything, the super helpful stuff, and just went for it and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to butcher some boars that are going to be 8 months old, and I'm going to pray for the best. And so I distinctly remember getting that meat back and grabbing a fish from the pile and frying it up my pan and being like, I hope I can eat this. So that was, and I keep in mind now, I had pre-sold some of this meat to friends and to friends. And so I'm kind of on the hook for this meat tasting good. And so I was like, oh, I hope this is okay. And it turns out it was totally fine. So I was like, whew. So that was kind of a big thing in the first year is, whether or not, there would be a Vortain issue.
Right.
And so before I butchered those guys, I think I had found out by that point, like, hey, this is kind of fun. I could kind of get into this. And so I decided to keep one of the boars. So I had 4, and I had a butcher date. And I was like, all right, I'm going to butcher 3 of them. And whoever's the most stubborn and doesn't want to get on the truck, he's staying, because they all look about the same to me. They were brothers. I don't really know what to look for in terms of like, stance and genetics and all that. I'm 8 months into this project. And so I was like, you know what, whoever doesn't want to get on the truck and whoever wants to fight the most, you can have a much happier life than what these guys are about to get.
There you go.
So I did. And, I kept the boar, and those ones went to butcher. And then I started, looking for sows, to say, hey, I'm going to try my hand at breeding. And just because by that time I was having enough fun, and I was like, hey, pigs can put out a decent sized litter, and let's try that. And so that was kind of my next step.
All right. So you finished 4, kept the one boar for breeding, processed the other 3, and so as you're looking for a sow or a gilt to breed, were you looking for another Hereford?
I was, and this is a funny story. So I love Herefords. I was super pleased with how fast they grew. I thought they looked beautiful. I was like, I'm all in on the Herefords. This is great. So I find another Craigslist ad in about an hour and a half away that says I think it was four Hereford, like registered Hereford gilts or something. And I was like, all right, cool. I'll go get those. And so I go down and I meet this farmer, and he opens up this little trailer, and here are these 4 beautiful jet black piglets. And I'm like, oh, like, come on, man. Like, I drove all the way down here. Like, these are clearly not Herefords. And so I got to have this awkward discussion with this guy.
Right.
So I'm like, hey, man, like, this isn't what I came down here for, And he's like, what are you talking about? So lo and behold, this whole time I had messed up the reading of this Craigslist ad, and it clear as day said Berkshire, not Hereford.
No.
And I don't know if I just had some sort of weird confirmation bias that I wanted to see Hereford, and I don't know what happened, but it was totally my fault. So long and short of it is, he's got 4 registered Berkshires for sale that are like, I don't know, $200 a piece or something. And I felt bad that I told him I was going to buy them, and we just sat there and talked, and he was real cool about it. And long story short, we come away with 2 of them.
Oh,
so I come away with 2 registered Berkshire gilts. And I was like, well, I hope this was a good decision. So I started doing a bunch of research on Berkshire, find out, that was a fine decision because they're a relatively popular pig in the Hereford world, and they got all this, good meat quality and XYZ. So it ended up working out cool, but it was funny. It's a total mistake on my part.
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad cross. That could produce some good litters there.
Yeah. So I got really excited about it. And as I was kind of waiting for them to grow to be ready to to breed, and then waiting for the gestation stuff, I was pretty excited for what this could produce. So, and it didn't seem like a ton of people were doing that out there that I could find. Like I knew it had been done, but it wasn't super popular. The Herefords grow quickly, and the Berkshires are known for this really good marbled meat. And I was like, hey, let's do it. So, then I had two litters from those 2 gilts that I got, and they dropped this past May. So, yeah. So
how did they fare? How well did that turn out?
Well, in like another thing, do new person, do all this research, farrowing crates, where the whole 9 yards, and figure out what you want to do philosophically. So I decided I wanted to let the animal do its thing. I was like, you know what? Bless all you people that have these baby monitors and go out there at 3 a.m. I was like, I got my own real babies. I was like, I'm just going to let this animal have its babies. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, great. But I can't handle the stress in my life of like monitoring when they're going to give birth. Right. So I put them together. I don't really judge the heat and all that stuff. I just put the animals together, and I was like, hey, at some point you guys have some babies. So as time goes by, I see they're clearly pregnant, and I know that the time's coming up for when they're going to be born, but I don't have an exact date on my calendar because I didn't pay that much attention to when they were in heat and stuff. So I knew I wanted to have them somewhat controlled. So I wanted to get the gilts separated and into like a pen in my barn with plenty of space so I could manage them, but still let them go naturally. So I get one gilt in when she seems like she's really far along, and have her in there for a while. I come home from school one day, and there's I think 10 piglets out there. And everything's great. Like literally just left in the morning, she's pregnant, came back, 10 healthy piglets all nursing. It's like awesome.
Yeah, wow.
So it's just really great. And that litter ended up having one runt that made it several days and was just kind of getting worse and worse, and it was about to die, and I pulled it out and tried to nurse it like kind of myself with milk and keep it in a container and all that stuff, and it died shortly thereafter. So one runt, and I think nine alive. So I was really happy with that. And the cool thing was, my Hereford is Hereford color, my Berkshire is jet black, and all my piglets turned out almost completely like Hereford red with some really small black spots. So that was really cool because I like the red better anyway.
Yeah.
So that was unique. Then my other sow, she is looking to be a little bit, she's not showing as much. So I'm like, okay, she must have been a little bit behind the other one. So she's still out in the woods with the board just kind of hanging out. I was like, all right, one of these days I got to get her into a pen. So I go out to feed them one day, and the boar comes right out, and the mom or the sow is not coming out. And when you feed animals, like, they come out for food time, right? Yeah. So she doesn't come out, and we had a storm the night before, and I was like, great. Did like a tree fall on my pig or something? Like, what the heck? This is just weird. Because the area where I'm calling them from is not that big. Well, sure enough, I start walking, and she's balled up under some branches out there, and she's got a bunch of piglets there. So she had farrowed in the woods all by herself, and everything was fine. So she had she lost one that was dead, like, at birth. Mm-hmm. And then there was a second one that died a day or two later. I think she had like 12 though, so I was down to like 10. So I had like a litter of, I think, 9 and 9 or 9 and 10, something like that. So overall, it's super successful, with like no intervention from me. So it went really well.
Yeah, that's
a long way to say that my farrowing went well.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, that's similar situation. My first farrowing didn't have a single loss out of both sows, and just had no crushing, no mummification, no stillborn, no runs.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, okay, this is easy. I don't know why everybody's so uptight about all this stuff.
Right,
this
exactly.
Is a slam dunk.
I'm like riding high.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, and that's you win some and you lose some, and I think it's funny. I had to laugh when you said you had a storm that night, because that's how mine usually farrow. You pick the lousiest weather. At the time of year, and it's when they decide to bust out and go to the woods and farrow. So,
classic.
Well, good. So let's talk about your setup a little bit. So your farm in Pennsylvania. How many acres do you have designated for your pig operation?
Oh, that's a good question. I have 11 acres total, mostly field with a little chunk of woods that they're kind of in and out of. For the pigs specifically, it's, I don't know, probably 4 acres, 5 acres.
Okay.
The random assortment of electric fences running every which way, and it's not super well organized now, but I'm working on getting it to be more systematic.
Yeah, well, so looking at that, as far as infrastructure goes, so using electric fence, still working on how you want to break those up into smaller paddocks, but how you handling water and your feed distribution, all that type of stuff.
So I have a well and well pump out by my barn, and my operation is kind of starts in my barn, and so like right now I have piglets who are in and out of the barn, and then it kind of bleeds out into the outer areas of my property, and so I just carry water in buckets. Right now I have about a 100-yard walk for the farthest one, and I just try and get a water bucket to the animal as whatever pen they're in, as as close to the farm as I can get it. So then, but it is basically just me walking 5-gallon buckets out to them, which is a little obnoxious, but it's not too bad. And then one thing that I did that worked really well, I know a lot of people have watering problems, but I inherited some plastic barrels. They're not even the big ones. They're kind of like if you like kerosene plastic carriers. I don't know. They're maybe 10 gallons or something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I took one of those, cut it in half long ways, and then I took a pallet and kind of manipulated the boards in the pallet and kind of pounded and screwed this plastic waterer into the pallet, and then I put a board across it, so it's kind of divided into 2 sections. And some of the pallet boards were I had some super heavy oak on them, and so it basically just weighs down this thing. And so that one they don't really tip at all. Yeah. Which is that's worked out really well. And then the other pigs have just kind of some basic metal containers, and they tip them sometimes, and sometimes they don't.
Right. Yeah. That seems
I don't fight them over it.
Seems to be a pig's prerogative. It's like, you want to put 10 gallons of water in a bowl? We're going to turn it over.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, hey, you know what? You're getting water twice a day, and if you dump it out right away, like, deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I do have one section of my property and fence that does have a creek going through it, and so the one that was helpful. So this summer, especially when it was, really hot, my sows could go down and wallow a little bit in the creek and get water down there. So that was helpful.
Yeah, that comes in handy. That's just one of those benefits of infrastructure, having some of those natural resources to help out there. It helps curb some of the work.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you had mentioned before we started recording about an interesting point. I think everyone would like to hear, and I'm sure all of us run into this at some point. So looking at your operation, you mentioned carrying water back and forth and doing a lot of things by hand. So machinery needs. Do you find yourself saying, okay, I really wish I had this, or I think my operation would run smoother if I invested in this piece of equipment? What conversations have you had with yourself so far?
Yeah, so on my farm, the only I have two pieces of equipment. I have a commercial lawnmower to keep my lawn mowed, which doesn't help me that much for the pigs, here and there to mow a pasture. And then I have a decent size, but still a walk behind rototiller, and that's it. So I don't have a tractor. I wish I did. That would be great to plow fields. And so I've done a lot of research on, planting mixes and what to plant behind the pigs pasture-wise that is best for them. Because right now it's just kind of the hay field that I inherited, and I'm trying to let them root it up and then go behind them and plant stuff that's better for them with, good seed mixes and all that stuff. But right now, what I do is I have my pigs in an area, and, it sounds great to have them till it for you, but the reality is they till part of it. The other part they don't touch. And, it's just not as simple as, I'll let the pigs till the ground for me. But I do that. I let them till it for me. And then I go into their section with my hand rototiller and I, fire it up and even it out as best I can. And then I hand broadcast some seeds and hope for the best. So I would love to have a tractor with a plow. That would be amazing. Or a four-wheeler, really anything.
Right.
But at this point, like I said, I'm not a full-time farmer, can't justify that investment or loan payment every month, and so right now I don't have that.
Yeah, and again, that's a good point, that growing at the speed of what makes sense and what is logical to keep you from getting upside down. Because like you say, you could go out. I mean, right now the way credit is for a lot of people, you could go out and buy a $20,000 tractor without any issue. And the only issue is you got a payment you got to make for the next how many years.
Right.
So yeah, they get in a situation and say, okay, well now I have to produce pigs for the next 4 or 5 years, and I have to be successful, and I have to be profitable to be able to cover the cost of my overhead. So yeah, kind of growing into that operation as it makes sense.
And like I said, for me, I have a full-time career. I'm a school teacher, which is nice schedule-wise because I have my summers off. I can get home in a decent hour, that kind of stuff. But I've always said throughout this process, hey, I'm a businessman at heart, so I'm really into making them profitable. And profit is just, not, what you make minus what you have to put out. Well, right now, other than my land expense, not putting out all that much. And if I had a, tractor payment every month, that would put a hurt on it. So I'm keeping things small right now. And just maximizing profit, even though that profit might not be huge, the margin is really nice. And that's just kind of where I'm at right now. I know a lot of farmers are doing it and trying to get by on it, but I'm just in a different spot. So
yeah,
it's nice for me in that it's really low risk. Like this whole thing could blow up tomorrow and I could be like, well, that was fun.
Yeah, exactly. Just walk away from it and have a freezer full of pork. Yeah. So with that, where are you? How many pigs do you have on farm right now?
So right now I have my boar, my 2 sows who I'm holding off, and I want to breed them later in the winter so I can get an early spring drop and kind of get on a cycle with them. And then I have four piglets that I kept from this past set of them, and the rest of the piglets I'd sold to other farmers. So I'm raising basically 4 feeders now, and then I have 3 breeding stock.
Oh, okay. So you sold the majority of your successful farrowing. You sold the majority of those just as weaners as they were coming off.
Yeah, and that was kind of an experiment too. I was like, hey, I got 17, 18 piglets here. I could probably raise all those myself, but that would be a lot for me. So if I can get people to buy them off of me, I'm going to do that. And that was another thing where I had no idea. Maybe they'll all be gone. Maybe I won't be able to sell one. I don't know. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of farmers around me, but I'm not networked with them well. And with like the heritage breeds, it's a pretty unique thing. Me having a Hereford Berkshire cross that's pasture raised, that's different than the guy down the road who has a random feeder pig that he doesn't even know the breed on and is confinement. That. Right. So I was trying to hopefully get the value of what I thought my pigs were worth, but the value of your product is whatever someone's going to pay for it. Like they'll tell you real quick. Exactly. And so fortunately, I just used kind of the social networking and sold most of my pigs to people who weren't directly local, and frankly sold out fairly quickly, at least the first litter. The second litter took a little bit, but went as well. And I had people travel from pretty far away, which was really cool and frankly really humbling that people would come that far for my pigs. But I hope they found it to be worth it. So it was really cool.
Yeah, and that's I think you made a wise choice there, especially understanding now your infrastructure and being light on equipment. You go to finish 15 to 17 to 20 hogs. That's exponentially, that's a lot of feed to move around, and
exactly, yeah,
doing all that by hand or in a wheelbarrow. That's, well, you're 28. Maybe you could handle it better than I could. But that really turns into a long year with a lot of labor. So what a great and I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think that's a great example for people listening that may be considering getting into this, to say, okay, you don't have to be afraid to try farrowing, to try your own breeding. And you don't have to finish everything that hits the ground. You can obviously sell the weaners. You can obviously sell roasters if you've got a market there. You don't necessarily have to finish it. If it's your first time finishing for resale, then look at those smaller numbers and don't be afraid to just finish a handful.
Yeah, and honestly, that's why I did it. I feel like a lot of people, especially in my position, would be like, hey, farrowing, that's too much for me. I'll just buy feeders and raise them and do that. But I was like, hey, if this pig can create 10 more pigs, and I can get, even if you got $50 a piglet for them, and I think people can do better than that depending on where you're at, you multiply that by 10, that's not bad. And so for me, it was like, hey, I won't have to pay for my feeders, and I'll keep some of them. And then, it's kind of like quick cash right there, assuming things go well, which for me, it was fortunate enough that they did. So
yeah, if you look
it's just maximizing easy profit, basically. Even if that might not be a high number, it was an easy number. So
yeah, and again, that's the beauty of the biology of a pig. The typical litter sizes can really become profitable. If you've got 10 pigs that hit the ground on one litter, and you say, I'm going to get rid of all of these, and you can sell those $50 to $100 a pop, that's a pretty good return on investment pretty quickly.
Yeah. And getting back to the barriers of entry thing, that versus like a cow that's going to drop 1 or 2 with a much longer time to get there. Like, shoot, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, very good. Well, so you're a year and a half into this. Chris, what would you say, for people listening, what would you say has been your biggest challenge so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, right now, at this moment in time, my biggest challenge is electric fencing, because I had fencing going great. I had pigs in a training pen, so they're in a paddock when they're babies inside my barn, so physical barrier that they can't get out of, and then electric fence on the inside to kind of train them on it, and then let them go outside. And man, that worked great for the longest time. And then I'm having an existential crisis right now, because apparently my fence wasn't as strong as I thought it was, and my pigs started testing it kind of out of nowhere. Yeah. And so just in the last 48 hours, I've had pigs kind of running everywhere. So I've been trying to get a new charger and figure out what's wrong with my fencing system. But before that, it worked like a charm.
Right.
So that was one thing, and I haven't figured that out yet. But
I'll tell you, just a tip from an old guy: 95% of the time, it's your ground.
That's what I'm thinking. And we're in Pennsylvania, so it doesn't get that dry, but it's been a dry summer. So I literally watered my grounding rods. I just dumped 5-gallon buckets on each of them. But yeah, I gotta address that and do some more research. So if you want to give me more tips offline, I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah, that's one of those things. Obviously, a good charger, good ground, and a good tester. Those are the things you want. And definitely when the chargers say you need this many feet of ground pole, then do that plus. And I found where we are in West Virginia, obviously we have issues with it's a very humid area. So I find that I'll even get buildup of corrosion on my ground wires. So every year I just go around and take my grounding components apart, scuff them up with some sandpaper, do whatever to rough them up again and start testing.
That's a good idea.
But yeah, a good tester helps. Like if you put your tester on your if it's a digital display tester and you put it on your ground wire, and if you're getting, what I'd always read is if you're getting more than 1 kilovolt on your ground, then you've got too much resistance on your ground. You got to start working on that. So, but yeah.
And that's the other thing. Like I didn't have a tester until yesterday.
There
I
you
was
go.
like,
Yeah.
time to get a tester.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's definitely a good investment. But then it's what good does a tester do if it's like, okay, it told me there was a problem. I knew that.
Right.
I got to go find the problem.
Yeah. I always.
But anyways,
I always joke that as people talk about the fence tester and say, okay, how hot does your fence need to be? Well, the hotter the better, of course. I've discovered with my pigs that I have to have at least 3 kilovolts to be able to make them respect it. And usually I run about 8 to 9 on my tester. But I always say I want it when they hit it. I want to smell bacon, because that's going to mean that's going to mean they're going to respect it a lot. But yeah, that's funny. That's a challenge I think so many of us face with pastured systems is that infrastructure. While the fence is inexpensive, keeping it hot, keeping limbs off of it if you go in the woods. Down here, it's an issue of deer. My deer like to blast through ours and tear it all to pieces. So we had to switch to 14 gauge to keep the whitetail from tearing it up. But yeah, it seems to always be a challenge there, but that's part of it. So
I will say, like, that's my current problem, but I've been blown away by, in general, how well electric fences worked. Like, that's the one thing I didn't believe when I was doing my research. I was like, you're telling me like 1 strand or 2 strands or whatever of fencing is going to keep this hog in? Like, that's crazy. And I think when I first started, I had a small area with like 5 strands. I was like, we'll work you guys down.
Right.
But now, I mean, it's totally, until recently, proved me right. And I have, 1 strand of wire almost everywhere that's shin height, and shoot, you got this, 500-pound boar that respects the crap out of it.
Yeah.
So that always surprises people if they come out to the farm and they're like, that's all you need? I'm like, yep, little 3-foot push-in fence post and 1 strand of shoelace wire, and we're off to the races. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's good. Yeah, exactly. It's good to do a risk assessment as well. Like in our situation, where if a pig gets out of my fence, there's really 600 acres of nothing around us, so I don't have to worry about them, doing a lot of damage. Whereas in some situations, people, if you've got some prize rose gardener beside you, then you may want to be a little bit more deliberate on maintaining your fence and being more of a physical barrier there. But so sounds like you're overcoming your challenge there with your tester. So looking back on the year and a half, what would you say was something you felt maybe was easier, or that you feel has really been successful and fortunate for you?
I mean, honestly, the whole production has been really smooth thus far. I've been really pleased with it, just in general. But to dive into more specifics, I think, and you were kind of asking about the challenges too. One of the things I've really been working on is feed. Getting back to what we talked about earlier with knowing where your food comes from and stuff. Well, garbage in, garbage out. I want to eat a good pig. Well, what's the pig eating? And so we have pretty much just one good food store around here, and they don't have an organic option that I'm aware of, at least. And so they've just got like a kind of generic 15%, pig meal type thing that I've always bought from them as kind of like my base food for, I mean, they're on pasture, but they need something else because I don't have my pastures where I need them. And so, but I'm trying to get off of that because I know this is just corn and soy meal. It's had Roundup dumped on it and everything else. And so I'm really trying hard to get away from that as much as I can, whether it's going from giving the pigs 75% of that as their diet to, backing it down to 50, backing it down to 25 as I increase other things. So back in December or January, I started really looking into the whole idea of fodder and checking out what people are doing there, and have really gotten involved with that. I mean, I'm small, so it's on a small level compared to some other people. But right now, I've built up my own fodder system that I'm pulling about, I think, like 30 pounds a day of fresh barley fodder. So that's been cool. And then I do have a couple of like fruit trees. I have a random, really, really tall, kind of a wild pear tree that last year I think I got like 100 gallons of pears off of it.
Yeah.
So that I got a bunch of walnut trees and stuff like that. So I'm trying to supplement food as much as I can to get my pig meal down, because I mean it's good in that I know what's in it in terms of minerals and all that stuff, but I'm trying to get away from some of those unknown ingredients and what's been dumped on them. So the fodder thing has really been an ongoing process for me that's had its challenges, but it's also been pretty successful. I'd encourage anybody to spend some time looking into that if you haven't already, because it's pretty good ROI depending on what you can get seed for.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And there's, I know we've had Carl Blake on before, and he has a pretty neat fodder
Bless his
system.
heart.
Yeah, that he's put in at a much larger scale. But yeah, I think you're right. Take advantage of, if you're just getting started out, take advantage of that small scale right now to explore some of these things. Some of these things aren't scalable on a high production level, but some of them really are. Even though some people would say there's no way you can do fodder for a handful of pigs, but when you go to 100 pigs, you're never going to do that. Well, there's people out there that would prove that statement wrong. So
talk to Carl.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of non-conventional options out there when it comes to raising pigs on pasture, and it's great as people try these and they share their information so we can all learn from it.
Oh yeah.
Well, all right. So along those lines, in your year and a half of experience now, what would your advice be for somebody who's coming up behind and saying, okay, I'm just to the point where I think I want to go buy pigs. I'm going to start searching Craigslist for pigs now. What would your advice be for somebody starting out?
Pay attention to the breed name on that Craigslist post.
Read the post. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, I think my advice would be to use social networking and start just kind of digesting that. I know a lot of us are on the Pastured Pig Facebook page, and I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably got it from somewhere. But anyways, if you do that kind of research and get those people on your radar, those groups on your radar, then you start to read, hey, people are posting this problem and this question, and it could have nothing to do with what you have. Well, in this case, if you don't have any pigs yet, but you can just learn. I think I liked that page before I had pigs by maybe a couple months when I was doing my own research, and people would just come and post stuff, and I would read about it, and I just kind of like file it away, and then that problem comes up for me, and I'm like, oh yeah, people have talked about this. So I think that was cool, because when you get into a project like this, like, you're really ignorant in that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when you're talking about people who do know what they don't know and they're asking questions, you can kind of file that away and be like, oh, okay, like, that's good to know. And a lot of it you have to throw out because, hey, that's not applicable to me. But I find that to be well worth the time if you have that kind of networking of people, or certainly local farmers too, if there's people who raise pigs. But I think that is like the main piece of advice I would give.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There's a community element there that we're in a brave new world, and we get to really take advantage of through technology to be able to communicate with so many people that that have similar interests, and we could share all of this knowledge. And that's obviously that was my motivation for doing this podcast. It's
awesome.
Is just to be able to talk to people. I learn more from the podcast than I ever imagined just by talking to people, and just to hear how people do their processes differently.
Yeah, it's great. So, that's my main advice. And then beyond that, train your piglets well on an electric fence, and
buy a good tester.
Buy a good tester much quicker than Chris did. And then from a sales perspective, I use that network to sell my piglets. But honestly, like, I haven't gone outside of my own interpersonal network yet to sell my meat. Now I'm obviously, I haven't sold that much meat, and I'm not doing 20 hogs a month or anything, but just word of mouth so far in my own friend network, people have come and bought halves and wholes off of me, and I do that just by kind of posting random pictures about my pigs or my farm or talking about it, on my own Facebook page or whatever the case may be. And then people be like, hey, let me know when you got some bacon available. And before you know it, I got stuff pre-sold before I even asked. So again, I know I'm super small scale, so that's not hard to do, but you'd be surprised if you just kind of generate that traffic for yourself, what people are going to be at to. So I haven't had to make a website yet or I haven't had any problem getting rid of my meat yet, which has been cool.
Yeah. And again, that all comes back to that scalability. Again, just grow at the speed that you want to grow and handle some of these efforts the best way. I mean, there'll be some logical speed bumps as you increase in size and you get to that point. It's like, okay, I've exhausted all my friends. Now what am I going to do? But
right.
That's a lot easier to swallow when you say, well, I only have to move 1 or 2 versus, okay, now I'm stuck with 30 and I didn't
right.
see this through. So that's I'll never forget. I had a guy reach out to me and say, hey, I've got I think he was finishing like 15 or 20 pigs. I'm about finished with 15 or 20 pigs, and now it's time for me to start seeking people out to buy them. And I was like, oh my goodness. So here you are, less than a month away from taking them to processing, and you haven't even begun to try to sell them yet. So,
yeah, that's what I try and do because I'm a planner and I don't like things that fail, and so I will try to pre-sale stuff, even if it's just a loose verbal, as early as I can. So, like for example, when those piglets dropped, I was trying to sell them as soon as I had a count on males and females and how many do I have, and even though I knew I had 8 weeks for them before they were weaned and ready to go, I tried to get those suckers sold as early as I could, knowing, give myself an 8-week cushion before they were ready to go out the door.
Absolutely.
Or if I know I'm going to raise a feeder, hey, I'm trying to sell that already, even if it's not going to be for 5 months, but I can put your name down.
Yeah, exactly. Deposits, verbals, whatever it takes to get people to get that mindset at the beginning that you want to get those moved. Well, all right. Well, Chris, I know you're new and putting things together, so you don't necessarily have a electronic presence, but I know you'd mentioned you're in some of the pastured pig groups. You're on Facebook, so if people want to try to reach out to you that way, how can they find you?
Yeah, I'm in the pastured pig Facebook group. I'm in there under Christopher James is kind of my surname on there, and so you could reach out to me there, shoot me a message. Definitely open to talking about people, or I'll probably just end up asking them more questions than they'll ask me. But like I said, I don't have a farm Facebook, or I don't have a farm website or Facebook page yet, but maybe someday.
Yeah, it sounds like that should be coming down the line soon. Well, all right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me tonight. I enjoyed our conversation, and I pray you have a good finishing on your pigs that you have left.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time to put this together. It really helps the community and what we're all trying to do. So I appreciate all the work you do.
Excellent. Well, all right. Take care. Have a good evening.
Yep. See ya.
Well, okay. I really appreciate Chris taking the time to sit down and talk with me. I hope you all find this information valuable, interviewing these people that are new to pastured pigs. Some of you weathered veterans, maybe you're not learning anything from it, but maybe you've got some information that you can impart and we can share. I know a lot of us are on the pastured pig groups, so feel free to throw out some comments there if you feel that there's a need to. If you haven't had a chance to yet and you feel so inclined, please give us a rating and a review. It really goes a long way. It helps other people find us. I do want to share a review with you. I thought this was kind of funny. So a review by the name of Dirty Rats gave us a review, and their comment says, it was 4 stars and says, love the podcast and the information presented. Audio balancing still needs some work. That tone at the end nearly gave my napping husband a heart attack. So, Dirty Rats, I apologize for that. I think I finally, after 20 episodes, I finally got my audio figured out. It's one of those things where what I hear in my ears when I produce this versus what the final product is sometimes varies, but I think I finally got that nailed down. And yes, those transition tones that I have really dialed those back quite a bit, because you're right, those do come in a little hot sometimes. So I appreciate the review, and hopefully we won't cause any more heart conditions or heart issues for your husband in that situation. And lastly, we have a couple more slots available in October. If you would like to be interviewed, you'd like to come on the podcast, we try to do our interviews in batches. So I've got a couple more slots in October. Just if you'd like to put your name in the list or suggest somebody, just go to redtoolhouse.com, click on the Pastured Pig podcast link, and you'll see a simple little form there where you can submit some information, and that way I can reach out to you or whomever you're suggesting and see about getting a time scheduled. Well, again, appreciate everybody listening to the podcast, and I pray you have a wonderful week on the farm. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes,
Visit redtoolhouse.com.